Okay, so this is part two of this episode from Filling in the History. And in this case, just kind of an opinion piece of something that struck me as I was looking at this. So this episode is just one section. It was just section 18. We don't have angels. We don't have plates. We've already talked about all of that. There's circumstances surrounding hiding the plates, and we've gone into all these extra things. And so I was really debating on what kind of a bonus round we would get on this one. Some episodes were so long I sort of forebore, whatever you want to call that. But in this case, I wanted to talk about something very interesting. So, um, in the documents of the Joseph Smith papers, from section 18 on, something changes, and that is there is a more thorough record kept. So, if you were to look at the document series, which is kind of a chronological view of just every scrap of paper we could possibly find, what's interesting is that what we've been reading so far is the order. There's been nothing really in between. So you get, a title page to the Book of Mormon, sections to the Doctrine and Covenants, but there's really not a whole lot more there. And that's because a lot of it was just lost. Later on in church history, there's a major edict from the Lord, if you will, from these Doctrine and Covenants sections, from these revelations, saying you need to keep a record. There must be a record kept. But until then, a lot of it was lost. And so I don't think it's unreasonable. Again, I think it's it makes a lot of sense to me that things like the first vision, which is accounted 18 years later in 1838, first vision happens in 1820. Our official account of it is in 1838. That's a long time past. A lot of stuff surrounding the Book of Mormon. We get what we get. We get a couple of accounts. Joseph Smith's own mother gives an account, but that's after Joseph Smith passes away. And there's all these sort of things. There's not a whole lot of contemporary stuff, which leads it up to, there's a lot of people who attack the church over these events because there's really not a lot of documentation. On the flip side, though, a lot of believers will insert a lot of stuff that isn't there because they want it to maybe be more special than what we have records to prove. And so there's a lot of anecdotal things and storytelling and whatnot. And it just, rather than going into like the church history side of it, I wanted to just give kind of an opinion about the importance of your life. Okay, so this is the library. This section over here, if you've been wondering what these books are, those are actually journals of my family's life. This section up here, I'm pointing with my right hand for those of you on audio only. Those are a set of just handwritten journals. And I don't think that I've heard this much lately, but there used to be a strong admonishment to church members to keep a journal of your life. That's this book of remembrance that you see right here is actually a harken back to something from the Book of Moses and the Pearl of Great Price. That book is where I actually have a copy of my genealogy. I have aunts and uncles who served genealogical missions. If you don't know, we do that sort of thing where they just go in to research names and try to, find people from ancient records and things like that and put them into some sort of a safe digital backed up, form of whatever form that may be. And so I have a copy of that. And it's been very interesting doing genealogical research myself and also reading these journal, like church history, the Joseph Smith papers especially. There's always a bit of mourning over there's a whole section of Revelation Book 1 that got torn out and never got put back. And they put the Book of Mormon manuscript in the cornerstone of the Nauvoo house, and it got water damaged and a lot of it's gone. And it's just sad. And so something that I feel strongly about is that I think our generation, this 21st century generation of human beings, because of things like social media, think that we've sort of recorded our lives. I would say there's probably a wider photographic and video record of any time in human history because of smartphones and things like that have made it possible. I'm doing it right now with this podcast. I would have never been able to do this like 15 years ago or 20 years ago. And I just find it interesting. I think it's important for us to record our lives. So this is just my opinion. Just reading all these documents, it's kind of sad when we just kind of have to fill in the gaps, what I've been trying to do, filling in the history. People do forensic stuff. They look at newspapers. They try to gather whatever they can. And at this point in church history, what's going to happen in section 19? We're going to get the last half of it. And then after that, you're going to get something called a letter book, which means that you're going to start actually seeing Joseph Smith's own handwriting, but it's actually Oliver Cowdery's letter. So what they used to do is they would receive a letter, they would make a copy into a book because they kind of felt like, and they were right, they're probably going to lose this letter somewhere along the way. And so they have this sort of record of it. And that letter book is the first time we really start to fill out the history at the time. And so just something for you out there listening, something for me to remember. I journal. I don't do every single day. I don't do diary style journaling. But what I do is if there's major events or hard things that have happened, which is actually frankly, one of the reasons why I started this podcast, something really tough happened to me in my life and in my family's life. And this has been a kind of my way of sort of doing something healthy and giving back. All that's recorded in a journal somewhere. And now it's recorded in this podcast, but I don't know if these things are going to last. But good things, bad things, ugly things. All of this stuff I think is worth remembering. So from the amateur historian to you, if you're not journaling, give it a shot. We're living in a remarkable age where it's really easy to do if you want to get an app. If you want to go old school, kind of like what I do, because I think it's interesting to see somebody's handwriting and see their mistakes. These are actually handwritten journals that I've done. These over here on my left side, these are photo journals. And so the point is there's a lot of digital, but we don't make it into something concrete like a photograph anymore. And so I have decided to print them on paper. And of course, fires can happen and floods can happen. But in the meantime, I do think there's something to be said about that. So if there's anything that I've maybe taken away from the first portion of these first 2 months of doing this podcast and these episodes, is that I think our lives are worth remembering. You may have various thoughts about me or others, but I think for you personally, write it down or print those pictures off. Get a hard copy of it so that you have something to remember, so you have something to go back to. I know for myself, reading my own journals, it just comes back. Like the smells and the sights and the sounds and all of it just comes back to me. So just something to think as we move ahead with the Joseph Smith papers. And as church history becomes a little bit more robust, and there's a lot more, there's a revelation book and a record book and a journal and a letter book and newspaper stuff, and all they kind of fills in a lot of those gaps. And frankly, that's not the stuff that people usually argue about when it comes to the truthfulness of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because there's a lot there. Let it be a reminder to us. I think your life is worth remembering. I hope my life was worth remembering, and maybe nobody will ever read this stuff, but I think there's something to saying like, hey, I just had a really interesting experience. It was good. It was bad. It was ugly. I'm going to write it down. And so anyway, just something to think about as we come to the close of the very early portions, these 1829 portions and before. It's a pity that a lot of it was lost. That's the nature of life, I suppose. And so, yeah, if you haven't, go get yourself a journal and remember your life. Anyway, so I'm the amateur historian. This has been Filling in History, kind of a short episode this week. And hopefully we'll see you again next week. And, again, if you don't know, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, like, subscribe, and do all the things. And thank you very much for joining me on this. I hope you've enjoyed it.